Hi everyone, it's Sherry and Carla, and we're going to be making some Harvest gluten-free bread today. Keep an eye out on the blog because there's going to be a lot more recipes to come.
Today we are going to make some gluten-free pumpkin harvest bread. I've taken a recipe and I've got a few modifications with it. We're going to be using a Cuisinart bread maker. This bread maker has a gluten-free setting. There's a couple things you have to know about gluten-free when you're doing baking. Everything needs to be at room temperature or a little bit warmer. So remember that the gluten is something that causes the bread to rise and make it more fluffy. So when we cook with gluten-free, we're going to use a few more flours so it gives it extra flavor. You get a little bit more health out of the bread instead of just regular wheat flour. We're going to start by making our dry ingredients first. We're going to use a sorghum flour. It's a little sweeter. We're going to use 1.5 cups of our sorghum flour. I usually use a spoon to do this because I'll get it everywhere. But that's the fun of cooking, so you don't have to worry about that. We're just going to spoon this in here. And sorghum flour is a little sweet. And we need 1.5 cups of this. So I'm just going to take 2/4 cups here. There. With gluten-free baking, you can do a lot of different breads. This bread today is a little bit more of a heartier bread. It's not going to be a sweet bread. So this is a great bread to take for holiday dinners. You can do a lot of basket breads with this. Tapioca starch. This is something to help it rise just a little bit. We need 1/2 cup of this. And as you can see, it is very fluffy, so I end up making a mess everywhere.
Carla's making a mess in my kitchen already.
I love to make a mess in Sherry's kitchen. Here we have some ground up flax seeds. And I'm going to show you also, we have some quinoa we're going to put in here also. And I'm going to show you how to do this over in my grinder. But right now I've got these ground up already. So we need 1/3 cup of our flax flour. Get this here. Dump that right in there. Now I'm going to show you how to make the flour in the grinder, and this is going to be made out of quinoa. We're going to use quinoa, and I didn't have any quinoa flour, so I'm going to make my own quinoa flour, and this is also how I did the flax seeds too. So we need 1/4 cup of the quinoa flour. I'm going to put it in a coffee mill. So I've cleaned out all the coffee so you won't get a coffee flavor in there. We're going to put it right in there. Put the lid on it. Make sure you're locked down. And this is going to be a little noisy. You want to put your coffee grinder all the way down to espresso fine because you're going to make a flour. So we're going to push the button. And it does make a lot of noise. But you'll see the quinoa turning right into flour. And that's plenty right there. So we're just going to go ahead and shut that off. We're going to flip it over so it's already going to be in the cup. Beat it down a little bit. Open it up. And there you have your quinoa flour. Now that we've made our quinoa flour, we're going to put it back in here. I'm going to go ahead and measure again just to make sure. When you're doing gluten-free baking, you really want to make sure you measure. Keep everything right unless you're doing different flavors. I didn't get really enough, get a little bit more in there. So there's our flax flour and quinoa flour. We're just going to set this over here. And we also need a little sugar, 1/4 cup of sugar. We use organic sugar. We also need some salt. We're going to go with 1.5 teaspoons of our salt. A lot of these gluten-free flours, they don't really have a lot of the salt flavor inside, so we do add a lot of sea salt in here to give it a little bit of flavor. Now here's something you don't really see in normal baking, and it's xanthan gum. This stuff makes it sticky, makes it stick together. We're gonna open up one of these little packets, and we're gonna measure this out. I think in one of these little packets there's about 2 tablespoons, so depending on how much you need, but this is called xanthan gum. Makes it all stick together. So we're gonna go 2½ teaspoons here of our xanthan gum. So we're gonna reach in there. There's one. And we're gonna get our half, if I could see. Do a little bit more because that one was a little light. There we go. Yeast. This is a bread, so it's got to rise. When you put your bread in your bread maker, it's got all kinds of different cycles. It'll knead it, which is really fun to watch, and it'll set, rest, it'll rise. Knead it, set, rest, rise. In here we need, if I could follow my recipe down here, the yeast is not coming, 2 teaspoons of yeast. And we mix that in just with the dry. With regular bread making, you may put the yeast in with the water. This one goes in with the dry, so you want it in all mixed up with your dry mix. So there's a little difference there. For this recipe, I'm also going to add a little 1/4 cup of brown sugar. This is just going to add a little pop to it to make it a little bit sweeter. You want a nice packed cup of light brown sugar. Just going to give it a nice little caramel flavor along with our pumpkin. We're going to add some walnuts to this. I'm going to go about 1/2 cup of walnuts. Depending on how many walnuts you like, you can add more, you can add less. You can also substitute more different types of nuts. You can go pecans. I went a little over 1 cup, which is fine. They don't have to be perfect. You may also want to do raisins, cranberries. What we're going to do here is we're going to give them a little light chop. Not too heavy. You don't want to make them microscopic. Just want to give them little chop and to give that bread a nice texture. Put it in here. We have just added some cinnamon. We did 1 teaspoon of organic cinnamon. We did 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground ginger and 3/4 of a teaspoon of nutmeg. That gives it that nice spicy fall flavor that goes really well with pumpkin. Make sure you have this really mixed up before you put this in the bread maker. Get that nice and mixed. And we're going to set this aside for a second, and we're going to start with our wet ingredients. You need 2 egg whites and 2 whole eggs. You need them to be at room temperature. That's another nice fun thing about gluten-free is it doesn't like to be cold. The bread won't rise as well. The yeast, it doesn't like cold temperatures. Neither do we, right? So we're going to go 1 whole egg. Again, I make a mess all over Sherry's kitchen. At least it's not mine, right? Now, to separate your egg, if you get a little extra yolk in there, that is totally fine. It's not going to hurt anything. Just go back and forth with your egg like this. I'm just going to drop that in there. If you're in a hurry and you're coming home and you need your bread to be done at a certain time, I just drop my yolk in there. To get it out, you just pick it up, let the white fall off of there. If that happens, not a problem. So if you do need that to hurry up and your eggs are cold, what you do is you just set the eggs down in a warm bowl of water for about 5 minutes. They'll warm up and they'll be perfect. So don't worry about that. Just wash my hands off here. We're going to give these a nice little whip. Nothing too major. You don't want to whip them too much. What you want to do with your wet ingredients is you want to mix them up lightly before you stick them in the bread maker. The bread maker has one little paddle that goes around in a circle. a lot of times you want to make sure that everything is mixed together. So in this, we're going to add one 15-ounce can of pumpkin. Yummy pumpkin. This is Sherry's favorite flavor of all the time. And that's why I decided to make pumpkin bread, because she loves it. So there's our 1 can of pumpkin. I don't want to really mix this up a lot. I just kind of want to move it around a little bit so that pumpkin stays right in the bowl, and just incorporating it with the eggs here. Next, we're going to need 1/4 of a cup of hot water. With gluten-free baking, it likes the water hot. So what you can do is you just turn your faucet on and just get it warm. The temperature it's looking for is about 150. Now we have our 1/4 cup of hot water. We're going to pour that in. We're also going to do 1/4 of a cup of olive oil. I'm going to use olive oil today. You can use other vegetable oils if you like. It's a nice cold pressed olive oil. Gives it a nice moisture, a great flavor. To give it a little zip and to help it rise, we're going to use 2 teaspoons of cider vinegar. Just a nice little extra won't hurt you. We're just going to give this a nice soft mix, and then we're going to put it in our bread maker. So we're going to start with the wet ingredients first. So they're all combined, and then we're just going to slowly drop them down into our bread maker. It might splash a little bit, but that's okay. We're just going to beat down on the side there, and we're going to start our bread maker. We're going to use our gluten-free setting because this will make a perfect gluten-free loaf of bread. The setting is number 5. This also has a menu. So you take your menu. Right now it's on number 1, which is a basic white bread. So we're going to hit our menu down to number 5. The whole process will take you 2 hours and 24 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and start it. And if you watch it, which I love this part because it's just fun. It's just moving around in there. So what you want to do is you want to get your dry ingredients incorporated at least 1 to 2 minutes into this cycle here. Since we already pre-mixed this, we're going to go ahead and add a little bit of our dry mix, trying not to make too big of a mess. And don't be alarmed when your bread maker sounds strange and stops. That's normal. Around. And then I can't help but play with it while it's in here. So I just kind of scrape around on the sides. And I'm using a metal spoon, which we shouldn't do that. I should have a plastic spatula to be playing with it. So we're starting to mix. Also, when you get your bread maker here, you may smell that burning smell. It's not on fire. That's normal. This is a brand new bread maker, only been used a few times. You might have a little bit of a smell there. You see how that's mixing up? Just around and around. And we're going to finish it off and put the rest in there. See, this is my favorite part. What I'm doing is I'm scraping down the sides here to get all of our dry ingredients mixed up in there. And I love this part. It makes me want to dance because it's making luscious bread. So you just kind of scrape right down the sides. And also what I find is I try not to get in the way of the wand, but if down in there, there's some really dry ingredients on the bottom. So I just take my spatula and just mix it around in there, just trying to make sure you get all those good ingredients off of it. We don't want to waste any of that. While your bread maker is mixing, you want to close the lid. It's got a little window up here so you can watch it. There is a couple cycles on here where it's going to stop. At the end, it's gonna come to the rise section, and it'll make about 6 beeps before that happens. You can actually put something else in here. If you want to add raisins, chocolate chips, cranberries, whatever you want in here, you can add that in. Today, we're just gonna have it plain, so we're just gonna let it go. It's going to go ahead and knead it, it'll rest it, knead it, and then it'll bake. And in about 2 hours, we're gonna have fresh bread. At the end of your bake cycle, you will have a beautiful loaf of bread. This is a gluten-free pumpkin harvest bread. I do want to show you at the bottom of the bread, there's maybe a little hole. This is where your paddle is from the kneading. So I let it cool in the pan completely, and then it pops right out, and I just pull that right out. So you don't have to worry, nobody's gonna see that part. So we are going to slice this bread and enjoy a wonderful slice of gluten-free pumpkin harvest bread.
Time to eat.
We're gonna try a little creamed honey.
Raw honey from Stratford Ecological Center in Delaware.
All it is whipped. That's all they do to it. Nothing, no
It really
preservatives.
looks creamy and yummy. And I'm sure it is. My mouth is watering.
We're gonna give Sherry this little piece.
So, don't be afraid to eat bread. It's not bad for you. It's just don't eat a lot of it and make sure that it's gluten-free. Delicious. Gotta try this one.
This is perfect. The texture is great. The honey sets off the harvest flavor.